Ladies and gentlemen, the chess world has a new world championship format. And in today's video, I am going to feature the best chess player in the world, Magnus Carlsen, the current world chess champion, Ding Liren, and the most popular chess player in the world, Hans Niemann. All of them are playing. This is a team event, and they play rapid and blitz chess. We don't really have one for classical yet. Maybe we will get one of those, as far as I know. But very exciting stuff. And today, Ding Liren played against Hans Niemann, and likely, in the future of this event, Magnus will play Hans as well. And Ding will probably play Magnus, and it's just going to be a great time. So, here we go. Also, my hair is a mess. I took a shower. I was playing some basketball with a friend of mine. I'm not particularly good, but I like it. It's like one of the best workouts you can get. And I finally took a shower. I like to shower, anywhere from once or twice a week because I like to save water. And it's up to you to determine if I'm telling the truth or not. First of all, we are going to feature a game, Arjun Evergaisi versus Magnus. Then we are going to feature Magnus's game against Rapport, which was a shocking game, actually. But that's a game I will show you. Then we have Ding Liren versus Hans Smoky Niemann, and then we end with Sumia Bilgun, Mongolian Grandmaster, also versus Hans Smoky Niemann. So every game is interesting. Let's start with Arjun versus Magnus. Now, this is a very interesting game. Not because I've made a move yet, but because they're actually playing against each other pretty soon in the Speed Chess Championship. So they play 15-minute rapid chess, then they're going to play 5, 3, and 1. I mean, you just keep pairing them in different formats. So Arjun plays e4, Magnus plays and invites a Spanish opening. Remember, it's a team format. So when you play black on board 1, you don't have to win. He doesn't have to play every single game for a win. Black plays knight f6, which is the Berlin, and actually, kind of surprisingly, Evergaisi does not accept the invitation to go to the Berlin, and instead he plays the anti-Berlin, which is fascinating stuff. Now here, generally, black is playing bishop to c5. That is the move that black chooses because white has committed a move to defend the center pawn. Instead of that, Magnus goes here. So it's kind of an anti-Berlin, but a little bit passive because now you have to play bishop to e7. And, I mean, it's one of the ways to play, but in classical chess, not a lot of people play like this at all. We have castles, bishop e7. And now Arjun says, you know what? Magnus chose a bad setup, so I'm going to play d4. It's kind of goofy because he just played d3. So why d4? Well, you can't take here. You can't take here. You can't take here. Actually, it looks like because of this, attacking the knight with the pin, but actually what black would do here is go a6. And now you're kind of in trouble here because if you play bishop a4, here comes b5. So now the knight is going to escape. That's actually not why. The real reason why is queen e2, targeting the knight and targeting this. And when you back up, that's when I start bludgeoning the center. And you're in some trouble here. Bishop here. I can probably even play something like rook d1 with a lot of pressure, but the computer just wants to take and just thinks that after everything, black simply cannot castle. So instead of that, of course, Magnus doesn't lose the game in 6 moves, castles, and exactly on cue, he plays a6, even though there is no king there, and now he plays knight to b8. In the Spanish, when you play knight to c6, and then later you play knight to b8, normally that's called a briar. I mean, when you do it, it's called a you're stupid. When they do it, it's called a briar. You are generally not supposed to undevelop to the home square. But in this case, if you develop to the edge of the board, which you really should not be putting your pieces on the edge like this, b4 just traps the knight. So, and if you go to a7, that actually is kind of stupid, but even that is better than going to the edge. So knight b8. And now we have c4. We have this kind of approach chosen by Arjun, which now resembles a King's Indian defense, but not really, because in the King's Indian defense, the bishop is on this square. And now Magnus plays knight c5 and just takes the bishop. So he just takes the bishop. And so now a very important point is white is essentially playing a King's Indian structure without a light squared bishop, and black in the King's Indian likes to have a light squared bishop to facilitate kingside attacks. So in chess, sometimes what we do is we do a little thing like your intuition. What does your intuition tell you to play in this position? I'll tell you what my intuition tells me to play. It tells me to play f5. So I need to undevelop my knight, but not to the home square. And now f5. And I think at this point, Arjun realized, oh my god, this is about to get very unpleasant. f5 is a huge problem. The thing is, if you take it, black activates the bishop and gets the open f-file. The thing is, if you don't take it, black can take on e4. You know what I would have played in this position? It's actually the top engine move, but it's kind of like orc chess. Like, I play Neanderthal type of chess. I would play f4. You know why? Because the next, like, 10 moves I can make are very easy. I just start going, me push pawns, and I just, you know, go on this side of the board. Yeah, Magnus is not an orc. He takes on e4, which is kind of crazy. He spent 4 minutes and he chose the wrong move, which doesn't necessarily mean he's not in good form, but, you know, yeah, he opts not to lock the position. Clearly, he thought that, you know, counterplay would be severe, and if he tried to play like this, maybe he didn't want to burn the bridges. Remember, you also got to realize, like, you're in a team format. So if you play really aggressively but then lose, you look stupid. All right, so he takes on e4, puts the bishop on f5, and plays knight f6. And he's not going to attack with the pawns. Yet. I mean, maybe he will in the future, but obviously the pawns would have liked to have come together. Knight d2, and now the queen is going on the light square. It's a really nice play from Magnus. So instead of using his pawns to attack, he's using the pieces. And now Arjun doesn't hang his queen. That's check. Replaces the knight in the center and protects it with the pawn. Now, the absolute only way you are ever going to break through in this position with black is by using the pawns. This is kind of why, way back, you probably should have locked it and attacked with the pawns. Because now, you still got to do the same thing, but white's gotten a lot more stable. And you see Arjun is doing what you were supposed to do in these positions. It's very uncompromising chess, and he's got a very nice counterattack on the best player in the world. Here comes Magnus. Here comes Arjun. Here comes Magnus. Here comes Arjun. So both guys are coming down the other, I guess, opposite sides of the board. h4, b6. Something's got to give. I mean, someone's smart, someone's dumb. They can't both be smart. That's not how that works. So Magnus now takes a moment to capture the pawn on b6. Arjun takes with the bishop. It's a good move. If he took with the pawn, the b file would have closed. So now he will put something on the b file and attack the pawn on b7. And he will also use the c pawn. So he's just going completely all in. That was not the best move. And actually what he should have done here is king h1, which is very unintuitive. And the point of king h1 is he stops h3 by playing rook g1. And all of a sudden, you are under attack, which is a big reverse. That is a big, big, big reverse. But he doesn't do that. He plays c5, and Magnus plays h3, and now you're not in time. So now you have to acknowledge the pawn, and now I've weakened your position, but okay, now what? Well, now Magnus takes. And the thing when you play Magnus is you gotta be ready for the endgame at all times. You never know when it's coming. And he goes directly into the endgame, and now he takes the pawn. And you see, a moment ago, aggression like this, c5, oh! It was good. But suddenly you trade all the pieces and go, wait a minute. Why am I just down a pawn? And you're just down a pawn. And I got really bad news for you. That pawn's going. That pawn is going c4, c3, c2, c1. That's what's going to happen. And this king is on the way as well. The one thing that white has is a strong d pawn, which is just not going to allow black to completely trample all over the board. So let's see c4. Let's look at Magnus's converting skills. He plays bishop c5 after spending a long time, but he gets rid of the bishop. Nice move, c3. The pawn is now 2 squares away from queening. Now he takes on b6. You can't take with the rook. And now there are 2 pass pawns. And the really bad thing about this position is you cannot take the pawn on c2. Can't take it. You have to, though, because what else are you going to do? Right? So Magnus forces him here. And I think the reason Magnus spent 3 minutes on this move is he was looking 14 million possibilities into the future. When Magnus offered a bishop trade, he had a feeling this was going to be the endgame, and he needed to think, can I win? Because my pawns cannot get through. I can't go with that pawn because this pawn promotes. Watch this. Watch as the endgame maestro wins the pawn on b6. But how is he winning? How's he winning? How does this make any sense? he still can't do anything. He can't leave. He's got to stay with the king in this square, or else the pawn queens. A5, B6. How is he ever going to win this position? Okay. And Magnus calculated that at the right moment, the king, in fact, can leave. And after D6, A3, let's say King C1, King C3, D7, B2, Magnus calculated that after King B1, King B3, he would mate his opponent as he made the queen. Which is so sick. This man calculated, I don't even know how many moves ahead. When Magnus played Bishop C5, I have a feeling, maybe he didn't calculate the whole thing, but his intuition took him 26 moves into the future times 2. This man saw 52 moves into the future. And basically was like, once I commit to this, I will probably have to commit to this, and then I will probably have to commit to this, and then I'm going to be winning. That is unbelievable. Unbelievable that he knew he was going to win this position. King D2, and I think, King C4. Look at this. This is another way. King D3, and Arjun resigned because D7, A1 queen, King C. Look at this. Look at this. How is that even possible? How can you be that good? It's bananas. Everything had to align up perfectly, like a Rubik's Cube. Right there. That's a Rubik's Cube. I bet you didn't know that. Maybe you did. Maybe you have good vision. Got a lot of stuff back there. I should make a video about all the stuff back there. Well, you know what that is right there. You know what that is. Longtime viewers know that that's the lava lamp. This is a piece of art right here. That thing. Right here. It's also a piece. And right there is a piece of art. Right there. See, to record YouTube videos for 30 minutes in a row with no editing, you got to be really good off the cuff. That's why I think I might try stand-up comedy. But with stand-up comedy, I have a live audience, so I'd probably like sweat a lot and get really scared. You got to be really good to do this. I'm telling you, to hit the record button, there's nobody else in this room or any inputs, and you just got to speak. You got to make the game interesting. You gotta entertain an audience. And the beautiful thing about chess, if I can just rant for like 10 seconds, the beautiful thing about chess is a lot of you watching this are children, but a lot of you are adults. A lot of you are like in your 50s and 60s and 70s. You don't write comments because commenting is for the young audience, but it's one thing I love about running into fans on the street. And it happens to me all the time because, you know, I'm like an A-lister, but on a serious note, like, very cool. So anyway, I just complimented myself because I started making reference to the stuff behind me, and then I get myself a content idea, and then I said, you just got to be off the cuff with this stuff, and okay, awkward. Let's move on to the second Magnus game. This one, nothing like the first one. So in this game, Magnus plays Rapport, who is now back to representing Hungary. Rapport is Hungarian, but for a little while represented Romania because they gave him millions of dollars, probably. I don't actually know that, but he represented Romania under FIDE, I imagine, because he was paid. Kind of like players move to represent countries, but more so clubs in football. And Magnus in this game got hit with a Caro-Kann defense. I love when Magnus plays the Caro-Kann, and I love when Magnus plays against the Caro-Kann, and I love when Magnus plays chess, because then I can make videos. Magnus, please keep playing chess. Pawn takes d5, pawn takes d5, and he plays bishop d3, and this approach with h3 and c3. Now, generally, play goes knight c6, c3, and then knight f6. And then white can play h3. Doesn't really matter in this game. We have this position. And now an interesting move. He plays e5. I always thought this line was bad. I never played this line with black because after pawn takes, knight takes, there's a really annoying move here for white, knight f3. And white basically just gives away the bishop and says, you have a stupid pawn. You have an isolated pawn. We're both going to castle. And I'm going to play the whole game against this pawn. But black is fine. I don't really like these positions with black because they're just a little bit like, they're too boring for me. But Magnus plays a move I've never seen before because I thought knight f3 was just the agreed upon thing. Queen e2, and here Rapport shocked me. His knight is attacked, So the other knight jumps in the way? He just gives up a pawn. But the wicked thing about this position is, you know how a moment ago Black had a weakness? I think the point is Black doesn't have a weakness anymore. Black has 2 bishops. So bishop d6, f4 does not win the knight because queen h4 check. So let's say you play knight f3, Black just castles. You cannot take the bishop because of this. And if you castle rook e8, Black is better. Black is better because Black has bishops. And your extra pawn is not really felt. I was like, dog, I've never seen this. I said that out loud when I saw the position. I was like, dog, I've never seen this. And then my monitor looked back at me and said, why'd you call me dog? And I was like, I didn't know you could speak. And that's when the illicit substances wore off. So knight e4, Magnus goes bishop b5 check. And I've seen some classical games where white takes the bishop and plays very solidly. Here's something very strange happens. Right here, Magnus can probably already castle. He chooses not to. He goes bishop e3 to stop bishop c5. Right here, again, Magnus can castle. Like, if you gave this position to a beginner, and you said, what's the most natural move here for white? I mean, some of them would go bishop takes bishop, but you would be like, well, I haven't castled yet, right? For whatever reason, he goes here, and I think it's because he was considering castling queenside. And then Black castled himself, and, you know, now's your moment. Maybe you go take, knight d4, and then you, like, long castle. I have a feeling Magnus looked at this and was like, I don't really want to do this. So instead of that, bishop e3 played. He plays, knight d2. Now he, again, spends some time here. He opts to play bishop takes, queen takes, and now he brings his, again, you can castle. But maybe already you're looking at some stuff, but I mean, the bishop will always go to d4, so I don't know. I don't really know, but he plays rook d1, so now there is pressure on his position. But suddenly, you start having questions like, this is the last moment white can castle. Basically. What I mean by that is, you got to take the knight first, because if you go here, knight f4 is fatal. So, you can take rook e4, and you got to go here. You got to. You have to castle. Now, okay, there's knight f4, queen d2. I guess he was probably a bit concerned about, like, this stuff. If king g2, rook g4, and you actually just straight up get mated, which is kind of insane. Queen g4 and queen h3, queen h2. But you can survive there after knight f4, queen d2, knight h3, you gotta play king h1. That's... Yeah. If you gotta do stuff like this, I can see why maybe he didn't castle. But unfortunately, the alternative is a whole lot worse, because suddenly Magnus Carlsen, queen f3 is hitting a bunch of stuff, but queen b... This is unbelievable from Rapport. Just unbelievable. I mean, you can take the rook, but now you cannot defend mate. Can you believe it? If you take, it's mate. If you go queen g4, I play h5 or f5. So maybe you sacrifice your queen, but then I just destroy you over here. So queen b5 from Rapport, and just f6, and now is the last moment. Magnus has to go a4 here, trying to deflect the queen, but the dust clears, and his king never made it out of the center. Ever. He goes rook d2 and resigns. Because rook here, if fe, rook e3, if king f2, there is this. If king d1, there is this. You got to go here. And then you probably lose in some ways, like bishop g3. And this is not a mate, but that's mate. Yeah, brutal. Oh my god. Magnus just lost a game in 20 moves. That is a rare sight. Absolutely rare sight. And I'm happy it was against the Carl Khan, but this is kind of crazy, and this is a really wicked line. Queen e2, knight e4. I've never seen this, and this is what I love. Now I learned something, right? Now I just have to desperately hope none of my opponents play knight f3. They all play queen e2. But after seeing this game, I think a lot of people are going to have their eyes on this game, and that's the problem with chess nowadays. Back in the day, a game was played, it took 5 months to analyze, it took a year to get out to the general public, in one newspaper, in a different language. Now every bozo on the planet just saw this game, and nobody's ever going to play queen e2 again. They're all going to play knight f3. Crazy, though. Rapport stuns Magnus. Now, let's move over to the Hans Niemann games and the Ding Liren games. Ding Liren, my man, my guy, showed up to, this is in Astana, I think. It might be in Almaty. Is it still... Is that the one that changed to Nur Sultan and then back? No, I think that's Astana, right? I think Almaty has always been Almaty. Kazakhstan, I don't know. I forgot. And like, this is the problem with recording stuff. I forgot. I don't remember. But I like to, you know, guess geography sometimes, and because that makes me feel intelligent. Yeah, so Ding Liren showed up, and he's just been like, y'all must have forgot. I'm the world champ, and y'all suck. Hans Niemann plays knight f6, e6. And Ding plays his beloved Catalan. Nowadays, I mean, the Catalan is good in every time control, but nowadays there's almost something to be said about the Catalan being maybe even a better option in rapid chess. In classical chess, where these nerds get like 4 hours, they can play a line and then they can remember stuff slowly, because remembering every line of the Catalan is not that simple. And so in this game, after gc4, queen c2, Hans plays this really forcing line b5. b5 is interesting, but if white knows what he's doing, black basically gets a colonoscopy for a few hours and then maybe leaves the room. Maybe. Talk about the worst colonoscopy of all time. A better and, you know, less scary analogy is you get a colonoscopy, but then your doctor's like, we lost all the records, so you got to come back. You know what? You get the procedure, but the electricity wasn't on, so nothing saved. So you got to have a second one. And basically, that's the way these types of things work. White plays a4, black completely, and I mean completely, loses the pawn on b5, just gives it up, and then plays a6, and is just a pawn down. Just pawn down, clean pawn down. Hikaru has popularized the move b5 over the last few years. If you look at the database, a bunch of Hikaru games, a bunch of Grisha games. But in classical chess, black has a lot of time to work out the kinks in the position. And you will notice that here, Ding plays queen c3 after 3 minutes of thought. So Hans now has 16 minutes on the clock, and he has played every move without thinking. Bishop e3, and now knight b4 is a nice move, trying to play knight c2, and Hans has gotten everything he wants. Ding plays knight c3, Hans takes the knight, still completely in his prep, knight c2 in his prep, knight e3 in his prep, queen e3, cd4 in his prep. Hans started the game with 15 minutes and this weird glitch where they get 17 seconds. So knight e3, queen e3, cd4, cd4, rook d8. This is all in Hans's prep. He has not even thought. Queen f4, now bishop f6, and Hans starts thinking. So Hans's prep was 20 moves of cutting-edge Catalan theory. But now you must survive a colonoscopy, and, you know, you're down a pawn. I mean, you are down a pawn. That is what you are down. You are down a d pawn. Now, in the long run, what black would absolutely love is getting to an endgame, which kind of looks like this. Kind of, all right? Let's just, obviously there is rook d4 in this position, but let's just say g6, e3. The more things that black trades and gets closer to the opposite colored bishops, that's really black's hope. You got to trade the pawns correctly with black. You also can't really rush. Like, if you do this, suddenly you are just worse because, right, you're in some trouble. You got to commit your pawns the right way. So we have bishop to f6. Ding plays e3. Ding plays h4. Very nice move. Stopping all g5 things and making kind of like a repelling mechanism. If bishop f3, Ding is never going to trade the queens. Right, so rook c8. Knight e1. Look at that. I just told you, giving up the bishop for the knight would have been really nice if you got the queens off, but now we're going to play knight versus bishop, and this is totally different. The more the game goes on, the more Hans is just a pawn down. I mean, he's been a pawn down. He's been a pawn down since like move 10, but you're really going to feel being a pawn down, like being an extra time in football, down a player. Bad analogy? Don't care. Queen c4, queen e4. Let's bring the knight out, and let's watch Ding Liren go to work. Ding Liren is a lawyer by education. Like, imagine being a college-educated lawyer and the world champion of chess. Chad. G6. King G2. We're watching a surgeon go to work. Look at this. H5. Softening up the position. What are you going to do? You're going to get your pawns doubled? You're going to let me take G5? What are you going to do? G5. Okay, now you got light squared weaknesses. Now I'm going to go in. We trade queens, but it's a very different story because now I have the active rook, I have the active knight, I have the pawns, and I'm freezing black completely. Hans in this game has been kind of like deer in headlights. I'm not insulting the guy. I'm just saying the position was not conducive of one that was going to let him get the kind of game he wanted. Definitely I don't know. I hate to say dubious opening choice, but now Ding is basically picking his moment to break. He does. And now comes the part where he starts extracting the pawns. Rook a6. You can't take on f3, by the way. Knight e5, rook h6, rook d3, king e4. It's just a matter of time. He's looking for his moment. The king is defending, but now knight f7. And he's going to win the pawn. But maybe he's going to lose the pawn on f3. He is going to lose the pawn on f3, and now if Ding is able to corral the pawn on g5 successfully, he's obviously going to win the game. He's 2 pawns up. Hans is defending. Rook g7, king h8, and now h6, plus 7, rook b3, king c5. Apparently, it was better to go here and zigzag along the light squares. When you go to the dark square, you allow the bishop to re-enter the game, which is sort of insane. He needed to go here. There was a very clear difference. Ding probably thought, why would this bozo ever bring the bishop? Because the pawn is hanging. But now he has enough time to run this way. Now here's where it gets insane. In this position, Ding Liren did not go king e4. That's a broadcast error. He went king e6, and Hans Niemann resigned. What? But Levy, it says 0.4. Why did he resign? He resigned because he thought he was losing the pawn on g5, which I told you. He wins the pawn, 2 pawns up. It's completely winning endgame. Well, now we go back to this moment. Ding Liren clearly did not think there was any difference between these moves. He was like, I'm going to walk over here. I'm going to mate him, or I'm going to win his pawn, and then I'm going to win the game. But the craziest part about this position is that it's not winning. If black goes rook b6 check, king f7, and here, the only move, stopping knight e7, knight to g6 mate. So now white, obviously, is going to win the second pawn. Right? It's going to win the second pawn. Now, black gives a check. Now, black gives another check. If you try to escape the position, I go here, and white, I'm not exaggerating, white can't move a single piece. White can't move the knight because he would lose the pawn. White can't move the king because there's really no benefit of moving the king. Okay, easy. White is going to play rook h5. Nope. You can't make any progress. Levy, what are you talking about? I'll just protect the pawn. Yep, bishop c1. King f3. I don't know, rook a6. This is a defensive fortress. If g5 is played, the king comes. White can't break. There's no way through. This is unbelievable. And if this, you take, and this is a draw. Rook and knight versus rook is a draw. Hans Niemann could have actually drawn the game if he had just kept giving a few checks. But he needed to spot, not this, he needed to spot bishop c5. And by a miracle of the chess gods, the game goes on. It's crazy. I mean, and the craziest thing is, this is findable because this is mate. So like, I'm not saying he could have found it. I'm not saying he could have found it, but I am saying that's bananas. That is, what a game though. And I mean, credit to him for not falling over and dying, and credit to Ding for putting the pressure for a long time. One game I would really like to show you to end today's video is this game Hans won against the 2400 rated Grandmaster that he played earlier in the event. It was a Nidorf Sicilian with this move f4, which is apparently called the Amsterdam variation, probably because everybody plays it as e5, knight f3, queen c7. It's a line that I really have not seen all that often. I mean, I get it. You're trying to, open up this, duh. And then white plays king h1 to get off of that diagonal, g1 to a7. And the reason I really find this game fascinating is, Hans is playing for a win. He's board one for his team, so he needs to beat people who are lower rated than him. And in this game, he was not really able to get anywhere close to doing that. His opponent played really solidly. There's absolutely no way to break through this position at all. like at all. White's next move is b4, and it's handshakes. In fact, there is an argument to be made if white really wanted to hold the position, white should have gone b4 now, so black would never break through. Black could go b6, but this is, now you're just losing. And in this position, after pawn to a5, staring at his teammates' games, Hans was like, if I play h6 and white goes b4, I will never, ever play for a win, ever. I can't move anything. If I start moving my kingside pawns, I'm just going to make my king much weaker. So in this position, this absolute psycho played rook takes c5. He straight up sacrificed the rook for the bishop, like this. One of the craziest things about this position is that black has almost made it. He doesn't even get 2 pawns. Bro got 1 pawn. He got 1 pawn. What? Is he insane? Rook c1, rook b5. Now, apparently, it was better to go b4 here, because if rook b5, the rook is actually kind of stuck, which is really annoying. And I guess Hans saw this and thought, well, I get my king into the game. Not so fast. Not so fast. Maybe then black has to go b6, etc. But rook c1, rook b5, and it's somehow Hans Niemann, despite being the guy down a rook, calling the shots against the guy that has 2 rooks. b4, king e6, rook c5, bishop c6. Now, this is a losing endgame, according to Stockfish. It's a losing endgame if you push your pawns correctly, but this guy Hans, watch this. Watch him defend all his pieces, win the pawn. Now b5 is actually a really powerful break to go over there, win the pawns, and advance. He starts trying to defend himself. King e1, he's still losing, but not after that move. White needed to go rook to g3. That was winning. Rook g3, and it's winning because if king f6, now the king is out, and now the rook is out, and white is winning. That was the setup. But his opponent misses it, and Hans, absolute lunatic, walks in with the king, the bishop, and it's GG. That's it. The rook can't stop both pawns. And he wins the game on the 55th move, promoting one of the 2 pawns shortly. What a lunatic! I mean, how uncompromising can your chess be? In this position, you just make a draw. You go have a dinner at the Kazakh restaurant, because that's what I imagine they serve there. I mean, and if white wanted to make a draw, b4 was the way to go. I mean, you play b4. The black, he's not going to do this. He's not going to, I promise. So Hans wins a nice game, and his team is 3 out of 4. I will keep updating you, and if there are interesting games, feel free to put them in the comments. So if you're watching live on day 2, respond to this video, tell me about some interesting games. Hans is playing, Magnus is playing, Ding is playing, and a bunch of other really, really strong top players are playing. I will cover the event as it goes on. Get out of here.